we've got you here to chat about sort of how everything, not just this conference, but what's going on with the economy is going down with the public. Let's start with Labour, that big blockbuster Times YouGov poll that put Labour 17 points ahead. I think that's the first time they've been that far ahead of the Tories since 2001. What does it mean? Pick apart the numbers for us.
It's one poll. That's the thing. We always get excited by one poll, and we're desperate, aren't we? We're desperate for that meme. Labour is 20 points ahead, and we're getting there, aren't we? But to be honest with you, I always say this to anyone who's getting overexcited. Honestly, look at all of them. Please look at all of them. They may be a few days out of date, but just do that. And at the moment, yes, Labour's ahead quite well. Not 17 points ahead, more like 12, more like 13, if you factor in for assumptions like, OK, undecided Tories come back. Or if you factor for things like, high Tory turnout. Because YouGov, they have a lot of undecided Tories there. Okay, and they're not going to be like that at the next election. A lot of them may come home. A lot of them may go to other parties. Other pollsters make that assumption, so it's always worth keeping an eye on all pollsters. So there are 12 points ahead.
Yeah.
If an election was held today, which it isn't, Labour would come away with a majority of 30, 40, 50 seats. That's good enough. And let's just bear in mind, they're coming away with that number when they're getting 3 seats in Scotland. They don't need Scotland for majority anymore. They are running away with it in Wales and bits of southern England. You want to call it Blue Wall? Go ahead if you want to. I don't really like the term, but you're talking about those old commuterville places like Warwick, Leamington, Stevenage, Rugby. Where else are we talking? Just follow the West Coast and East Coast main lines. These are the seats that Labour are turning red in quite a new way, and it was verified in the local elections. So what we're seeing is a perfect storm right now, aren't we? We are literally in the perfect storm. It was raining like nobody's business last night here in Liverpool. It's perfect at the moment, but it won't be perfect come the next election.
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned Scotland, because I think Starmer really went for the SNP in his conference speech.
Scotland needs a Labour government that can deliver change. But it also needs the power and resources to shape its own future, whoever is in power in Westminster. And the SNP are not interested in this. For them, Scotland's success in the UK is met with gritted teeth, seen as a roadblock to independence, and so they stand in the way. We can't work with them. We won't work with them. No deal under any circumstances.
And I think that's one of the first times it's been that explicit. I spoke to some people from Scottish Labour before the speech, and they were very excited. They'd seen an advance statement. They said it had given them confidence to go and face the SNP. They think Starmer's very popular in Scotland, so that's interesting, even though, as you say, Ben, it's not essential for them at the moment in terms of the polling.
Yeah, the thing with Starmer is he is better than any previous Labour leader they've had. He's better than the Tories, really. He's doing quite well. Anna Sarwar, rather, is actually the best. He's the second best polling Scottish figure at this present time. Nicola Sturgeon, she's running away with it. She's been First Minister since 2014, and not once has she really dipped into negative figures, with the exception of the furore surrounding her and Alex Salmond. She really has got it there. She's quite impregnable. So the minute she goes is the minute I think it's all to play for there. To be honest with you, what Starmer said in his speech, what's very key, no deal with the SNP. Okay, maybe that might change when the arithmetic is clear come the next election. But what it says to voters is that this Labour Party is very pro-union. This Labour Party isn't messing around like it was under Richard Leonard or other leaders about the question of independence. This is a party that's very much speaking to you straight. Okay, and sometimes, you might want to appease, the target demographic, the focus group voter. But what Starmer did there was he just put his cards on the table and says this is what it is. And voters do like that, because voters, they're clever. They don't want to see a superficial politician saying like, we've got to appeal to everybody and all that type of stuff that we've had for the past 10 years in social democratic parties. This was good.
Yeah, and one of the key factors that Starmer's been struggling on is decisiveness. And that's where Truss always put all her chips on, is coming out with such a strong policy straight away, even if it wasn't initially popular, to hope that voters saw decisiveness and backed her. It doesn't seem to have paid off. I mean, she's not had the bounce many predicted.
No, but you're right. I think Keir Starmer sounding like he can give straight answers to slightly tricky questions. The Scottish question has been difficult for Labour for a long time. Suggests that he is trying to move on from this image of himself as someone who sits on the fence, which I think voters have kind of struggled with in the past. But it's interesting, he made that sort of intervention about the SNP, and he's also been quite clear that he's not interested in talking about electoral reform. This is all because he doesn't want to be accused of stitching things up or making pacts before the the election, or being accused of a coalition of chaos. Let's not forget that iconic line from the Conservatives. But, you know, does that mean that, you know, things get tricky for him when he does get into power? How likely is it, do you think, Ben, that Labour will win an outright majority, according to the evidence that we have now?
At present, they've got
Predict the future, Ben.
Right, sorry, that was an unfair question.
So it's a perfect time to advertise. Britain Predicts. Where's the camera? Okay, hello. Look, Britain Predicts, we have it on the New Statesman, State of the Nation. It's a good model. It tells you, you know, how swingy a seat is, and it makes pretty good assumptions. It got Wakefield pretty good, Birmingham and Eddington pretty good. It does well with by-elections when it's not the Lib Dems ruining the arithmetic, really. But it's currently forecasting a majority for Labour without any bit of tactical voting. Okay, and that's the thing. We know, as I said in perhaps the crude way, we're a nation of swingers now. We are less loyal to our tribal parties than we used to be. Leave, Remain broke that. UKIP broke that. The so-called green surge in 2015, it wasn't a surge. It was from 3 to 7% and then fell back to 3. You know, the idea of you voting alternative parties has made this country a lot more willing to entertain alternative parties, which means tactical voting is a lot more attractive. And at the moment, the modelling, excluding that, already has Labour on course for majority. You apply, you know, some basic modelling, you probably got a pretty big Labour majority already. So at the moment, yes, it's fine. There are still problems with the party. You know, Starmer is only likeable because Truss isn't. Right? Okay. He really is sort of a standing start. He hasn't really moved around. You have about 1 in 3 to sometimes 4 in 10 voters who just don't have an opinion of him. Right. But that's a problem. He's still got to set himself out. This speech could change it.
Energy bills in Swansea are paying for schools and hospitals in Stockholm. The Chinese Communist Party has a stake in our nuclear industry. And 5 million people in Britain pay their bills to an energy company owned by France. So we will set up Great British Energy within the first year of a Labour government. A new company. And because it is right for jobs, because it is right for growth, because it is right for energy independence from tyrants like Putin, then yes, conference, Great British Energy will be publicly owned.
It was good, it was newsy, it was popular as well.
Yeah, and you could feel that in the hall. I mean, just sat there, you could see the faces of the delegates very excited about what he was saying. I mean, people were jumping out of their seats to stand up and applaud him. So I think once you feel that in the room, often that conveys and goes, and people feel it around the country as well. Yeah,
I thought that was a bit of a moment. And they'd squared the circle of that difficulty that they've had over sort of being accused of weaseling out of renationalising industries as well. They've kind of given enough,
I thought it was very interesting that Miliband didn't commit or say that this Great British Energy, that their new policy, he said they wouldn't include nationalising the energy companies. So I think we do have to look at what it is actually going to be then, and how it relates to the rest of the energy market.
I think it's a clever compromise, isn't it? Yeah, for where they are with their activists.
Yeah. It's good. It appeals to the activists. You just look on Twitter, and I'm not going to name names, but certain sections of left Twitter are actually positive for once about Starmer. That's news. That's progress, isn't it? But also, you've got to just remember this. The public generally support public ownership, but you need to be seen as competent. You need to be seen as being able to do it. This is the thing about the Labour manifesto of 19 and 17. Individual measures were popular, just like the budget, Kwarteng's budget. Well, some bits of it were popular, but the overall package of it, it wasn't speaking to you. Was it speaking to you of, well, in 17 and 19, a bit more chaotic. You couldn't be trusted to handle the books. So Starmer's, when he's talking about public ownership, he's really got to put across that competent line that he's going to be good about it. And so, to be honest, in the speech, what did he say? He said, like we can't do good Labour things for a good few years.
Yeah.
He knows it.
I thought it was very interesting.
He's aware.
Every policy we announce will be fully costed. And we will set up an office for value for money to make sure public spending targets the national interest. And we should be clear about what that means. It means not being able to do things, good Labour things, as quickly as we might like. That's what responsible government looks like. Because if you lose control of the economy, if you act irresponsibly, as the Tories have done in spectacular fashion, then you lose the ability to do anything. And working people pay the price. We will not let that happen.
I feel as if that paragraph went in there about a day ago.
Yeah.
Because they were like, we need to lower expectations a little bit, because as we spoke about in the first half,
Yeah.
public finances are a completely different place now. And given all their spending commitments, they have to really acknowledge that.
Yeah, and actually on that, just lastly, Ben, with public finances in such a state, with the pound crashing, how has that come about? How has that come across in the polls?
Disastrous. It's absolutely disastrous. I made this point on multiple podcasts ago, which is that we don't appreciate how switched on the public are to the cost of living crisis.
Yep.
I always say this. I'm from a family, apathetic family. They don't vote, and the only thing we whinged about in the good times of New Labour, the good when the economy was growing, we were still whinging then. Oh, I wish we could win some money, and we'd whinge that now, and we're whinging that during the cost of living crisis. And it's very easy to hear that and think, oh, that's just the country normal, really. But we fail to realise. I think a few of us in Westminster have failed to realise just how switched on the country has been to the cost of living crisis, how it's cross-demographic. It's not just the lower incomes, it's all of us, really, who are going to feel some sense of a squeeze. And the pound doesn't help. 80% say the fall is very important. You have a plurality of Tory voters saying they don't have confidence in Liz Truss to handle the cost of living crisis. There is no confidence in any leader out there at present to handle the main issue of the day. That's Starmer's opportunity, but is he gonna do it? Is he going to come through?
Well, thanks so much for coming on in person, Ben.
Delighted
Very exciting
be
to have
here.
you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.